Hello, everybody. It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. And if you've been following our YouTube channel, you already know that we've been putting out some really great content all about March's Women's History Month. And today we're going to do an extra special edition of Tune In. And this Tune In is all about women who rock. Um, these ladies aren't necessarily rock musicians. Of course, I'm just using colloquially the term rock. Some of them are folk artists, some of them are definitely more pop dance tuney, but they all share a sort of iconic persona within the music industry. They've all already done things that make them memorable to audiences everywhere. And I can honestly say I am 100% a fan of each and every one of these 10. Now, of course, these 10 are not all inclusive. They only include the artists that are easily available on Hoopla Digital, which is, conveniently enough, available totally for free to those of you who have a Milan-Berlin library card. Um, so yeah, these are still, though, 10 diverse artists that have created really fantastic music over the decades and who I think everybody should give at least a listen to at some point, simply because they've made such an impact on the industry in whatever genre they may participate in. So, with that, I want to go ahead and jump right into this top 10. It's in no particular order, it's just 10 artists that I happen to really, really enjoy. Okay, the first artist I want to mention is the band Heart. Now, Heart was formed in 1967. It's this crazy rock band that's fronted by Ann Wilson as well as her sister Nancy Wilson. Nancy is like a virtuosic guitar player and played some ludicrously famous riffs that even if you're not a huge classic rock fan, you'll probably recognize if you were just listening to a randomly classic rock station on the radio. Anyway, they're super famous for songs like Crazy on You, Barracuda, Alone. Now, Crazy on You, you might recall, even if you aren't a classic rock fan, again, uh, as the background music for the weird fantasy dream sequence in the Harold and Kumar movie, the first one. Um, but yeah, it's an insanely good song. Uh, Anne has one of those voices that just stretch and stretch and stretch. She's like a true rock musician dream vocalist. Like, it's just insane how elastic her vocal cords are. And because of that, you get these powerhouse notes at the top of a range that should sound super screamy but never really do. Um, and that's super apparent in songs like Crazy on You and Barracuda. Um, Hoopla has quite a few of their earlier albums and a few of their latter albums. The ones you definitely want to check out is Dreamboat Annie. That's their uh, debut album, and it's amazing. I mean, it has Crazy on You, it's got Magic Man, and just from beginning to end is ludicrously solid. The other one I would definitely recommend if you can only listen to a couple albums is the Greatest Hits compilation from 1985 onward. Um, it gives a nice little sampling of everything they've done in the latter part of their career. And Anne's voice, like, definitely held up way more than a ton of other musicians from that same era because, like I said, she does have that elastic belt and she constantly was using that. So a lot of times that voice really will degrade over time, but she can still hit the notes. She can still really wail. So I would definitely recommend giving Heart's albums a try, whether they're from the beginning of their career or from the latter part. She has one of those voices that is so easily recognizable that, you know, even if you're just randomly in a store and you hear a song over the overhead, I mean, you will definitely recognize her tone. And like I said about her sister, does these ludicrous guitar riffs that are so memorable. The opening to Crazy on You is one of my favorite guitar openings of any song ever. It's just so cool and just really intricate, and I mean there are pieces of like classical guitar right in there along with like, your standard rock guitar. So please listen to Heart. Such an awesome group, and definitely worth checking out on Hoopla. All right, number 2 on my rundown is for the artist Tori Amos, who I was a massive fan of when I was in high school in the 90s. I mean, I listened to her constantly. Like, I loved the way she played the piano, I loved her voice, the way she wrote lyrics. And consequently, yeah, a lot of her stuff is definitely very emotastic, I guess would be a good way to describe it. But it's not childish by any means, which as an adult, I don't feel very cringy about having been a huge fan. Like, that's definitely not how I feel about some of the other artists that I used to listen to. But I still really enjoy Tori Amos, her voice, the way she writes, the way she performs. Like, her live albums are crazy good, like, crazy good. Um, a lot of times now you get a lot of the pre-records, which still to me is insane. Like, why go to a live concert if you're just listening to something that's been pre-recorded? But that's neither here nor there. That is not what you get with Tori Amos. um anyway, like I said before, she was hugely popular in the 90s, um and hugely popular amongst people my age. uh you would go from like tracks that are seriously sparse with just like some piano and a little bit of like super vulnerable sounding vocals to like much more heavily produced up tempo tracks that, you know, could sometimes almost feel out of place if you didn't think about them in terms of like musical context. But when you do think about them and the way they fit in with the entire theme of an album, were always spot on exactly where they needed to be. Um, so that you don't have like a flatlining album. She had fantastic ebbs and flows to the way that her records went. Um, and I really loved like the the open, bare your soul vulnerability that her lyrics always had. Like, whether or not it was an up-tempo piece or a really slow sorrowful dirge or something that recalled like abuse, and like, because there are definitely tracks that 100% go to really dark places. um all of it felt so authentic. Like, it felt original and unique to her. Like, all of her songs were stories about her and so personal, and it's like she's like just giving you a little glimpse of the way her mind works. I don't know. I still really love her albums. I hadn't listened in quite some time, but when I was working on this, I popped Little Earthquakes back in and I was like, this is a ridiculously awesome album. Um Speaking of which, you know, that confessional writing style was apparent regardless of what genre she was dabbling in, whether or not she was doing one of her like strictly piano pieces or if she was doing sort of like electro beat. It was always there. um if you decide to check out some of Tori Amos's tracks, I would definitely recommend the deluxe edition in particular of Little Earthquakes, which is available on Hoopla. The deluxe edition has the remasters of the full original album, which has like Winter, which is one of my favorite songs of all time. Little Earthquakes is also beautiful, but it also has live tracks. And as I was talking about earlier, her live performances are so exceptionally good. I mean, just really truly amazing. And as someone who's gone to see her live, like, this is someone you should definitely listen to live. Excuse me. um okay. Other albums that you should definitely check out: Under the Pink, another must listen. And then the album Strange Little Girls, it's a cover album entirely made up of songs originally performed by men. There are definitely tracks on there that are better than others, but it's a really interesting album and an interesting concept, like how gendered a lyric is, and her exploration of that concept. Um, she's got like the Beatles song "Happiness Is a Warm Gun" on there. Uh, There's also I Don't Like Mondays, which is a phenomenal song. I actually wasn't at all familiar with the original. I only knew Tori Amos's version, and I have always loved the song. Um, they're just a ton of really interesting songs on there, including one that Eminem originally uh, performed. So it really runs the gamut from like pretty hardcore rap hip hop to classic rock. So that is again Strange Little Girls. Definitely fascinating album that you should check out if you're at all interested. So that was Tori Amos, and I believe Hoopla has almost all of her discography. So please check her out. Okay, my third pick is for the artist Billie Eilish. I know she's super young. She's also super new to the scene, really. But I think she is shaping up to be one of those voices of a generation. She speaks so much to young millennials and Generation Z. People love her. I mean, I'm on the cusp of like I'm at what like an exennial because I'm at the very beginning of the 80s. Anyway, and I do really think that her lyricism and like the way that she writes and the way that she performs and her visual style are so fascinating. Like songs like When the Party's Over, Bury a Friend, these are songs that are really good regardless of age. And I also just absolutely love that she controls so much of the art that she puts out, like her music videos. She is the one who puts the majority of the input in there, and those videos are crazy arresting. I mean, visually stunning and just in directions that I think not a lot of other young artists are going in right now. So, I do think that she's really fantastic. I love the way that she writes, and definitely worth checking out her debut studio album, which is We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go, is I believe the only album that's available. But 100% worth checking out. I'll be really interested to see what successive records sound like if she decides to like reinvent herself every time, or if she continues developing this particular style that she has, or how things evolve with her. I definitely am very interested in seeing that. So Billie Eilish, she's my third pick. My fourth pick is for the folk darling Joni Mitchell. you know I grew up listening to Joni Mitchell. My dad had every single one of her records, and my mom loved her music as well. And I just recall hearing these songs with this soaring lyrical soprano and really emotionally evocative lyrics. Uh, and honestly, I know with Eilish we were talking about the voice of a new generation, but Mitchell definitely was the voice of her own generation. I know most people talk about Dylan as being that folk era hero, and I love Dylan's music, the way he writes, but I've never loved the tone of his voice. I mean, I think he has a really unique sound, but I loved the way Joni Mitchell's voice just sort of floats up there. It's just I love her. Anyway, you know, I also one of the other things that I really find appealing about her is that her songs are so very introspective and personal. At the time, I know we had a lot of message songs like the 60s and the early 70s. You were talking about like the big picture in the world and changing things, and that's obviously ludicrously important, obviously. But I have always been drawn to the small pieces of music, like the pieces that just sort of talk about certain individual situations, and that's what she did. Like that was her MO. And of course she did have some big picture songs like Big Yellow Taxi and stuff like that, but I think what makes her so unique, so memorable are those songs that were so introspective and that were so soul bearing, you know? Of all of her discography, most of which is available on Hoopla, if you listen to no other album, you absolutely need to check out Blue. It's, for the longest time, I've always said if I only have one album that I can take with me to a desert island, it's going to be Blue. Um, it's not the most lighthearted of records. Uh, the vast majority of songs on there have this serious thread of melancholy going through the lyrics. They are heavier. They are more broken than a lot of her other albums, but it's just so personal and it's so powerful. And that's not to say that every single song on Blue is sad or depressing or whatever. I mean, like, there are definitely upbeat songs on there. It's just the ones that I think of immediately when I think of Blue are certainly songs that are a little heavier. Um, you've got tracks like A Case of You, Blue, River, My Old Man, and California. I mean, it's just a ridiculously solid album from beginning to end. The first track to the last track, you don't have a dud on there. It's just incredible. Um, some of the other albums on there that I would definitely give a listen to include Clouds, Ladies of the Canyon. Ladies of the Canyon has Woodstock on there, which is fantastic. I love that song so much. Um, but then another set, like all of her newer work, really fascinating to compare her voice back then to her voice now. I think I mentioned her early voice was this lilting, high, floaty soprano. And it's definitely not the same. I mean, it's a much lower, much earthier tone these days, but it doesn't make it any less compelling. I mean, it's rougher, yeah, but it's also very real. It doesn't feel like degraded in any way. It just feels more mature, I guess would be a good way to put it. And I think that if you do find yourself enjoying her songs, make sure that you check out the early work versus the newer work. It's really interesting to watch that evolution or to listen to that evolution. So yes, Joni Mitchell, beginning to end of her discography, absolutely worth taking a listen to. So my next pick is for a woman who needs very little introduction, the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. I mean, with hit songs like Respect, Think, Chain of Fools, and a really iconic rendition of Natural Woman. Like, there's not a whole lot extra to say about her. She just had one of those voices that could blow you away. I mean, it was powerful, it was deep, it could range from like alto to soprano. Like, there was just something really virtuosic about it and still like light at the same time. It's just a really fascinating tone, I think, to it as well. Um, and one that you don't get tired of. Like, that's the other thing. I could listen to Aretha Franklin songs probably for days and not get bored. Um, so Hoopla offers a number of greatest hits and compilation albums, which are all really solid. I was taking a look, and I mean, you can't go wrong with one of those. But besides that, if you listen to her actual album collection, say like I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, Lady Soul, Young, Gifted, and Black, these are all really phenomenal and well worth a listen. They have that cohesive nature that the producers who put them originally together knew they wanted you to listen to songs in a certain order, a certain particular collection of songs in that way as well. So I would definitely recommend those three. And if you find yourself interested in any way in gospel music. All of her gospel albums are crazy, like crazy. Um, just the way that she plays with notes and the way that she like lets certain things hang. It's just she's just really truly incredible. Uh, so yeah, I absolutely would recommend those. It's interesting to hear like the old familiar sacred songs sung in Franklin's style, because she never issues that. Like she has her style and that's how she sings those songs, and you will like it or you will lump it. Um, so yes, please do check out Aretha Franklin's discography on Hoopla. You won't regret it. It's fantastic. Ah, so my next pick is Stevie Nicks. Uh, it didn't matter if Nicks was harmonizing with the rest of Fleetwood Mac, because who doesn't love the Mac, or warbling on her own in her solo records. Nicks's voice has this easily distinguishable tone to it. It's really warm sounding, but there's definitely this distinctive raspiness to it as well. And I don't mean raspiness in a negative way, but it's rough, right? So there's definitely an edge to anything that she sings. Um, and when you hear it, she uses it so effectively. She knows exactly how to bend notes with that sort of raspiness, and it really works so well on songs like Landslide, Rhiannon especially. I think no one else sounds as good as she does on that song. um Edge of 17 uses it absolutely wonderfully. The list goes on and on and on, but those three songs in particular, I think just her quality of tone are what that's what makes those songs so memorable. Now, if you're looking into quintessential Fleetwood Mac records, self-titled debut, absolutely a must listen. Tusk, and of course Rumors. Rumors is far and away for me the best Fleetwood Mac album. I love that album. And for Nicks's solo work, definitely try Belladonna. That's the one that has Edge of 17. And then The Wild Heart is also another really, really solid one of her albums. Most of her even more recent work is also available on Hoopla. So if you find that you really enjoy listening to her, you'll be able to find pretty much everything on there. So again, Stevie Nicks. So another artist that I absolutely adore, Debbie Harry, the front woman of Blondie. I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of the band Blondie. They really got their start performing in the infamous CBGB club in New York. And they're definitely one of those bands that's always been a little bit ahead of their time. They had this kind of proto punk, pop punk sound for a while, but it also blended things like disco and reggae and like even a touch of, say, like rap in there sometimes. It's definitely one of those bands that was always excited and willing to explore their sound. They were never a band that was happy to just like sit in one place and stay the same. They were always willing to change. So Blondie gave us hits like Heart of Glass, the song Call Me, Rapture, One Way or Another, which is fantastic. And I find that One Way or Another is used so often in television shows. That's always exciting when we find that. And then, they had a hiatus for like over a decade. And even after that hiatus, when they managed a successful comeback in the 90s, they had this hit single with the song Maria. I mean, that's hard to do. Like, usually a comeback with that kind of a band isn't really looking for new success. They're looking for ways to capitalize on past success, and they far and away surpassed all of that. Now, um, Blondie, in addition to having this really kind of eclectic sound and ever evolving sound, also was really particular about their visual aesthetic. I mean, all bands, I think, especially from that era, were definitely looking at things like that. But there was just something really particular about the way that Harry and her band approached the appearance of things. Um, but even saying that, like, the music never suffered. It was definitely music first, look second. Uh, and I think in large part that was due to Debbie Harry's voice. Like, she looked fantastic. She always looked really awesome, regardless of what kind of costume she was wearing. But the sound that came out of her throat was just like so amazing. She could go from this light, flirty, kind of chirpy tone that you get in songs like Heart of Glass, like almost insubstantial. That's not the right word, but that's kind of how it feels. Like lyrics and tone that are kind of laissez-faire. They're not trying to be weighty or overly heavy or anything like that. You could go from that kind of a light, fluffy tone to like a big belty growl like she would use in songs like Call Me. I mean, she could go from this flirty young thing to belting rock ballad monster and in nothing. I mean, it's like the shift could happen between tracks, and it's so impressive. um I mean, really so impressive to be able to have that kind of control. So if you are looking to get yourself introduced to the band, or if you just want to revisit some old tracks, check out Parallel Lines, Eat to the Beat. Those are both really good for a nice sampling of their early sound, which I still think, even though it continues to evolve, is pretty exemplary of how they approached music. But sadly, No Exit, which was their comeback album in the 90s, is not available. But that's another one I think people should listen to, just because, like I said, it's so rare to have a comeback and have it be newly successful the way that they did. So, yes, if you can find it, No Exit, excellent album as well. So please do check out Blondie. Fantastic band. Okay, for an artist who is as much about a visual statement as she is about a musical one, I think as far as contemporary artists go, we can't forget Lady Gaga. Um, she's like the mainstream pop world's version of avant-garde music. Um, she is always interested in making a statement musically and visually. So you've got these mind-meltingly catchy tunes because, you know, I don't know that she's put out a single that I couldn't hum back to you at the very least. I might not know all the lyrics, but I definitely know the rhythm and the beat, and how the basic notes go. Um, as a choreographer, she had done choreography for years, so she knows how to put together really solid choreography, and she has done that for herself. That's one of those things people just expect. If you're listening and watching a Gaga song, you're going to get great dancing. Um, and the great music and the great choreography are always accompanied by ludicrously slick videos. Um, she, again, is very, very much someone who has a visual style that's constantly changing, but that also is easily identifiable, if that makes sense. Like, she doesn't stay in her lane, but you can tell a Gaga video from the first 10 seconds for the most part. I mean, you might have completely different color schemes, you might have completely different styles, but it's a Gaga video. Like, there's a massive difference between like Bad Romance and Paparazzi, but it doesn't matter because you know that they're both her. Um, it's just very, very impressive, and I really love the way that um, she presents that part of her art. And she does. It's a rinse and repeat scenario, but it doesn't get boring. Every song is definitely different enough not to feel like a rehash of the last song, I feel. And she does have those moments where within this pop dance sort of style, she'll have an insanely good ballad, or she'll have something really just totally unexpected thrown in. And that's sort of, musically magical in the course of listening to an album from beginning to end. I love that about her. Now, she's reinvented herself multiple times. She even has an Oscar nod for her performance in the remake of the remake of the remake of A Star Is Born. Um, and I have no idea what's coming next, but I'm sure it will be exciting. That's just her MO. So if you want to check out her albums, they've got everything on there, including a ton of the remix albums, which I would definitely recommend checking out as well. The remixes are always really interesting of her songs. I don't even like remixes for the most part, but I do enjoy listening to the ones of her tunes. So you've got Fame Monsters, solid, Born This Way, her self-titled debut. And if you're curious about the newest album, that's called Chromatica. Uh, it's got a couple really fantastic tracks on there, including the one that she sang with Ariana Grande that just made major headlines like last week because they beat BTS, and that was such a huge thing online. The drama. But Lady Gaga is generally no stranger to drama, so I suppose I should not be surprised. So yes, Lady Gaga, check her out and check out her music, all available on Hoopla. Okay, two more artists to go, and the second to the last is, of course, Sia. I am a massive, massive Sia fan, and I have been for years now. She's so much more than the bewigged singer who refuses to show her face in front of audiences. She is a brilliant songwriter. She has written songs for so many artists. I mean, she's written more hit songs than you can shake a stick at. I mean, at some point, please, I strongly recommend going to her Wikipedia page and just looking at that songwriting list and the different groups, the different artists that she's written for, and you will find something that you know and probably absolutely love on there. And it runs the gamut of all different genres. I mean, if you want like super pop, she's written songs for like Britney Spears. She's written like R&B stuff. She's written songs for Neo. She's written songs for Rihanna. Diamonds is a good example. She's written songs for soundtracks and for musicals. I mean, she's just so incredible. I'm just such a huge, huge, huge fan. Um, and she's been around since the 90s. She's 97, I want to say, and I've been a fan from the get-go. I used to listen to her earlier albums on repeat. I know I was massively fond of her when I was in college in the early 2000s. But what I think is really interesting is that she only really found mainstream success in like 2014, I want to say. That's when her record A Thousand Forms of Fear came out. A Thousand Forms of Fear is iconic for her simply because it contained songs like Chandelier, which was everywhere for months and months and months. Like, I love Sia, and even I was getting sick of that song. Elastic Heart, which I'm still not sick of. I love that song. Fire Meets Gasoline. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous album with really fantastic lyrics. Um, and she sounds amazing on them. Her voice is incredible in its range, in its emotional quality, in every aspect. So I just think that everyone should give her a listen. So besides A Thousand Forms of Fear, which I think everyone should listen to, try out Color the Small One, which features a song Breathe Me on there. If you were a 6 Feet Under fan, Breathe Me was featured in the very last episode. It's like the montage of uh, everyone's lives at the end of the series. It's a gorgeous song. I've always found it really, really beautiful. Another album, We Are Born. That one was again prior to her mainstream success, as was the Color the Small One. And then This Is Acting, which is one of her most recent albums. All of them contain phenomenal songs. But what's really cool about her albums is they are a very cohesive product. She definitely wants you to listen to her songs in a certain way, and I think that if you listen from beginning to end, you really get another story layer on top of the individual songs themselves. So yes, please check out these albums. Sia and her early work are just so good, and she's just one of those artists that I wish more people were familiar with her earlier work in addition to her contemporary stuff, just because she's so incredible. So my very last artist in this quick 10 person rundown is for the iconic mononym Cher. It's admirable for many reasons, not the least of which is turning what's tantamount to not much more than an octave vocal range into a multi-decade award-winning career. I mean, I adore Cher and I adore her work as a singer, as an actress, just as a comedian. But the woman really has an 8-note range. I mean, sing any of her songs and it's not much more than 8 notes. But I know all of those songs and I love all of those songs and I can hum all of them. I mean, she's had an amazing career and she's managed to do it with that. And I think that's massive in its own way. She's gifted with this really mellow kind of contralto tone, uh, which you don't find too much of in pop music in general. The other contraltos I can think of really are like Lana Del Rey. Maybe if I thought really hard, I'd find another one, but that's real. The Cher and Lana Del Rey are the ones that immediately pop to mind as far as female pop stars with low voices. And because of that low tone, it's kind of covered and a little bit husky. There's almost a bit of a mysterious quality to it, especially in Cher's earlier work. You know, even in say like super epic duet I've Got You Babe with Sonny Bono, who was her husband at the time. Like, it's not your average pop duet. A lot of times, especially in that era, you'd have like the bubblegummy, lilty female voice with the guy's tone, whatever the guy's tone is. Sonny Bono has like a really forward kind of nasally sound, and she has this husky covered tone. So the tones shouldn't work together, but strangely do, and it's just one of those songs that makes you smile when you listen to it. I at least that's how I feel with I've Got You Babe. And I think it's her sound that carries that song as opposed to his. And the lyrics aren't particularly memorable either. I mean, it's a really probably pretty average pop duet, but because her voice is so unusual and because it combines with his in such an interesting way, I think that's what elevates it to something kind of special. Yeah, I'm just even thinking about it, like the rhythm's not particularly unique, lyrics are just pretty standard, nothing overwhelmingly special, but that sound, it's so one of a kind. And again, that sound is pervasive throughout her entire career. Her voice doesn't really change. Even today, it's still pretty much the same. Even when she speaks, she's got that lower, huskier tone, and I absolutely love that. If you want to check out some of her work, I strongly recommend the Dark Lady album. I love that song. I just think it's so cool. Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Both of her Cher titled albums, she has one from the 60s and one in the 70s, I think. Both of those have some phenomenal tracks on them. And then I kind of hate myself for recommending this, but simply because it's so much of a departure, Believe, which is one of my least favorite of her albums. It's this electronic pop toned it's not even bubblegum. It's just this very electronic-y album that has so much like voice work with it. It's really interesting. It is so interesting to hear her low husky voice sort of altered with electronic capabilities that it becomes fascinating to listen to. And it does have some good songs on it, like at least very catchy songs. So while that may not be my favorite iteration of Cher. It's still one that I think people should listen to simply because it's such a departure. And, at that point in time, that she was still excited and interested in making changes and exploring different parts of her voice and style, I just think is super admirable, because even at that point, she'd been doing this for decades and decades and decades. To be willing to take risks, that's a big deal. So yes, Dark Lady, the Cher albums, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, Believe, you know, she's a one-of-a-kind artist, and she's definitely someone you should check out. So please do check out her albums, almost all of which are available all through Hoopla. As I had said before, Hoopla is available to Milan-Berlin library card users totally for free. If any of these 10 artists isn't your cup of tea, or if you can't find an artist on this list that is your cup of tea, please check out the site anyway. You will 100% find somebody that you love on there. And you'll be able to find tons of other stuff on there as well. It has audiobooks, it has movies, magazine. I mean, it's such a great site, and I really thoroughly encourage people to explore. If you have a recommendation for an artist people should check out that I didn't mention, I'm sure you do, because I could only pick 10 and this video has already gone on for what feels like hours. Please do recommend them to other music lovers in the comments. We all know that we love sharing our favorite tracks, so just make a comment below. And with that, I'm going to close things out. Thank you so much for listening and watching, as always, and I will see you again in our next Tune In. Bye!